So here's my biggest question is, you said that your kids were in school. It was summertime here. How did you sell that? You just sold your kids on year-round school.
That's hilarious. The 11-year-old caught on to that a lot quicker than the 8-year-old.
When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into episode 58 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snellings Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. Today, I'm joined by Kevin McManus. Kevin is the founding attorney of his law firm, Kevin McManus Law, in Kansas City. His firm helps people in Kansas and Missouri build a better life after an injury or disability. Kevin's firm has grown rapidly over the last 5 years, but he's most proud of creating a culture where his team thrives and loves what they do. Previously, Kevin was in an elected office both at the state and city level and continues to be involved in a number of causes in Kansas City. Kevin, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to this one. So you're a relatively young guy. And if you're not watching this on YouTube, you really should, because Kevin's a good-looking dude. He's a good-looking guy. So check him out on YouTube.
A little more white coming in, but yeah, I'll take it.
So why on earth did you think that you should be running for political office at a pretty young age?
I was so much younger then. I didn't know what I know today. I mean, it was a while ago. So I started getting involved in politics really right out of school. I went to a university and studied government and worked for the county prosecutor and helped on a race, and then worked for a city council person. And much to the chagrin of my parents, because I was actually a pre-med student who just dropped all the labs and was like, my dad was a lawyer and he was always like, don't go to law school, do something different. Right. And so I got bit by the bug, I guess is the easiest way to say it. I started getting involved in things. And then when I moved, I did move to DC for a little bit after college. I went to law school. And when I got out of law school, I got a job at a big firm, but I still had the bug. And I think I was 29, and I threw my hat in the race for a state rep seat in our Missouri legislature. And someone told me during the campaign, they said, the worst thing that could happen is you win. And it took me a while to understand. At the time, I was offended because it was a lot of work.
Right.
We worked really hard. And it's a whole story. I left the big firm in order to do that, which was scary. Left a really good salary at the time and security. Had just gotten married. My wife didn't know anything about what she was getting into. And won, and then had to go to Jefferson City, half the year at least or more.
Right.
But we didn't have kids at the time, and it was easier to do that. But slowly, it's like your life is a series of choices. And so that was a path I did. And, I had to kind of come to terms with slowly understanding this isn't really where I want my life to go, and being okay with changing that. It's just like anything, anybody who's started a business, I think, comes to that point, unless it was given to you. But if you really start a business, you're making a very conscious decision, right? This isn't something you just do on a whim. You really have to be thoughtful about it. And so that was kind of the evolution for me, was in a way, I think back on it, because I'm it was hard for me to say, look, after 13 years, I was in the legislature for 5 and city politics for 8. I'm going to just stop doing that, because you invest so much time and relationships and energy, and to be I'm just going to close that chapter and do something else. But what what helps me understand that, because your ego is telling you got to keep going, right? With whatever you start, you got to just keep going. You got to get to the best. Everybody's going up. You want to be a winner, and it's BS. Like, you got to ask yourself, what do I want out of my life? And really be quiet and think about it. And that's what I did. And it took me time. It wasn't like a one-time thing, but I think what I learned was I did build relationships. I did do certain things in running campaigns that do translate into running a campaign for your business, for marketing. There were things I did in terms of just people skills, that were very helpful. And by golly, I still believe in like democracy in our system. I still think like there was a purpose for that. And I'm really proud of like being involved in giving back in that way. So I don't regret it, but it was a process, Scott. It was not like an overnight thing.
Man, I got to tell you, my law partner ran for a state rep seat, and I watched what she did throughout her campaign. I watched what she had to deal with. I saw some of the messages that were sent her way by people who they would do it under their own profile. Like didn't even care that she knew exactly who they were based on what they were saying. And man, was it bad. And so not only was she, working as a full-time attorney, she's also doing all of these things after hours. I mean, it was basically a 7-day-a-week job between block walking and going to events and speaking and all of those different things. I don't know how you did it. And it's just nasty. Absolutely nasty.
Yeah, there's different aspects. I mean, it's a grind. Like to really run like we did, it's a grassroots thing. It's not glamorous. Like it's not like behind me, I've got all these like political books when I studied government. It's not those books. It's such BS. Again, I have to say, it's just BS. Like what they teach you in school is not the real world, right?
Yeah, it sounds a lot like law school in some certain phases too.
Yes. I mean, there's things and frankly, but I'll go back to like what I was saying earlier is like the reason we won. Well, number one, I had a very understanding spouse and very supportive.
Right.
I actually get kind of like emotional thinking about it because we didn't have kids at the time, but she was like, I was working still as a day job as a lawyer for a small firm. I had to leave a large firm. They basically told me like, if you do this, you're fired.
Yeah. Don't come back.
And, that was a whole soul searching thing, when you're making like, granted, it was a long time ago, but still like low six figures. And you're like, I'm going to like give that up. And by the way, the Missouri legislature paid $32,000 a year. So,
bit of a
that's
spread.
Not gonna be, yeah. You don't do it for the money. It was, you really had to be clear on what your priorities were. And I had to be, but more importantly, you had to be dedicated to it. And we knocked on thousands of doors. I had a friend who told me, if you want to really win, you got to knock on doors in the winter because nobody knocks on doors in the winter. So we had this whole thing where we would dress we had to dress a certain way. We're in Kansas City. We're not in Texas, so we had to.
It actually gets cold up there.
Yeah. And then you go to the doors. And by the way, people aren't exactly happy to see you.
You're letting cold air in their house.
Yes. So I put my wife up first because she's pretty and they would answer that door. But then I'd come in and be like, hey, but I think the message is you're willing to talk to people and listen. More importantly, listen to people. And man, that's a powerful thing that translates into a lot of things. But politics is different than it used to be. I don't know that campaigns are run that way anymore. Maybe they are at the really low levels, but we didn't do any TV, no social media. I mean, it was really just door knocking and postcards and telling people, remembering people and remembering their issues and building like real relationships with them. And then when we saw them at the polls, it was like, I had people like hugging me, and then I obviously had some people who were like, nope, I'm going this way. But, it just teaches you about how to deal with humans.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important aspect of it. But it's changed. I think in the last 10 years, things, and that's what really kind of, for me, it was just like, I'm good. I could see a real stark shift in just how people relate to each other in the political realm. It's become less of a kitchen table discussion and more of a dyed in the wool religion that we will not listen to the other side, and we were going to go this way no matter what, on both sides. It's just people have made their decisions, and they're not going to have conversations anymore about it, largely. And I think that's unfortunate. But it was different when we did this it really was different here, at least, when we did this, over a decade ago.
So you mentioned a word that comes up quite frequently, and that is the grind. And with you running for a campaign, that grind is a little bit different because there's an end point.
Yeah.
Win or lose, there's going to be an end point. That grind will stop.
Totally.
As a law firm owner, as a lawyer, that grind doesn't stop. Well, it's going to stop at some point. You either retire or you die. But at some point is often the future for hopefully a long, long time. So how do you approach that each and every day? And how do you help your team approach that grind mentality?
So I think about this a lot. So, and I think it's it sounds like a bad feature to say it's not over, right? Because you kind of just want to get to the destination, right? And be like, it's done. Success, and you do get that. You do get that with politics. You do get that in certain things in life. Like you ran the race, it's over. But yeah, our thing is different. But it's like, what game are you trying to play? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? I think about, there's status games of like, I am now X. And so I have done X and now I am it. And I think I'm just not, the older I get, the less interested I am in that. And same thing with money, by the way. Money is X, and now I have that, and now I have achieved X. And, if you've talked to anybody who've done, I think we've all gone through this where we're trying to achieve something and then you get it and you realize like, maybe that's not actually the source of all my happiness that I thought it would be. Right.
Yeah. Hey, I walked across the stage. I got that law degree. Well, now I got the bar exam. All right. Well, I passed the bar exam. Now I've achieved it. Well,
it's
but
really
now I have
over.
A career to build, and so, it's this false mountaintop.
It is.
And
you
it's
have
really
to embrace the process, I think, is the key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for me, one of the things that really helped me, I remember being at my first, lawyer job. I was at a big firm downtown and just grinding it out. I was learning a ton. I was working a lot of hours. I was putting in the effort. I was a single guy. And so just really putting it all together. And I remember I'd started in September, I think, and the next summer rolled around and it was like May. And all of a sudden it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, I will never have a summer break again. Like, this is my life. Maybe I take a vacation here. Maybe I have 2 weeks off here. But oh my gosh, that realization, obviously I knew that's what it was, but actually going through that first kind of summer where I didn't have an extended time off, it hit me hard. And so I really had to reflect on, okay, well, obviously this is how adulting works. You don't just get to take off 3 months at a time. And it was a real mindset shift that I had to kind of go through. What do you do whenever you kind of reach those mountaintops and you accomplish this big thing, and then all of a sudden you see like, wow, that's not it. It continues to go, and there's not necessarily a break in there for you.
I think the thing I continue to do, and I haven't figured this out, but the thing I continue to do is think about like, what do I want my day-to-day to be like? What's that look like? What's the perfect, and not every day is obviously ever going to be perfect, but like, what's the perfect kind of mixture of things that I want in my life on a day-to-day basis? And for me, building everything else around that, as long as you got your basics, your food, your water, shelter. No, I'm serious though. Like, if I can figure that out, like that's a recipe, like those other things I think will come, and it's a recipe for success for me, is like, because that's what I want. I want to get up in the morning and not dread the day, right?
Yeah.
It seems like so obvious, but I think our American culture, like we are so driven toward the end, and we totally leap over I mean, I use the word grind, but it really is like the day-to-day process of life, right? And if you can figure out, what do I want that to look like? And design everything else around that toward achieving it. I think to me, that's like the wealth aspect of not necessarily the money. The money is a tool in that, but it's really about the wealth of time and just being able to enjoy the time we have because it's short.
Yeah. And I think really focusing on that day to day has been huge for me. So for instance, each morning when I get to work, or if I'm working from home, whenever I get started that day on work stuff, I have this best self journal. I think you probably have one of these too. They gave them out at a GLM conference one time, and I loved it. And so I've just continued to subscribe to it. And at the top left, there's a place where it says gratitude. And so every single morning, I will have 1, 2, and 3, and I think about 3 things that I'm grateful for that morning. And it can be something super specific, like, hey, X happened yesterday, and that was amazing. Or it can be like, hey, I got to see a beautiful sunrise on my run this morning. It can be something like that. And so that kind of centers my focus on, all right, now that we're in this grateful mindset, like, what does today look like? If I accomplished, 1 thing, 2 things, 3 things today, what would make that great? What would make that a great day? A lot of times it's work stuff. A lot of times it's family stuff. Or it's reconnecting with someone. But for me, that focuses on the present. Because, man, right. Have you read The Gap and the Gain?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Great book. Man, I am constantly looking at the gap if I'm not focused, right? And for those of you who haven't read it, basically the premise is we're always striving for the horizon, and the horizon never gets closer to us. We're always running. Keeps moving. It's not getting any closer. Yeah. But if we stop occasionally, we look back and we see how far we've come, what we've accomplished, all the blessings that we have in life, then that's kind of where your real happiness is. And so for me, having that morning routine of really thinking through, hey, this is what I'm grateful for. This is, hey, if I can get this done today, it's going to be an amazing day. And then it changes my mindset to today, not off into the future, not necessarily looking back at the past, which I think is super healthy to do. I have time for that as well, but really focusing in on the present. How do you do that? Because you seem like you're pretty good at that too.
I'm not as thoughtful as doing that every morning in a routine. That's the goal that I have. So I don't want to put on a premise that I've got this figured out. But man, I think having some routines are key, and it doesn't have to be the same for everybody.
Yeah.
But you got to have some time to think. For me, it's usually every day. I mean, I've been kind of a crazy person to get movement in just because we're sedentary at work. And if I don't actually move, I start like mentally, I think it just makes that like monkey mind go a little crazier.
Right.
So it's like,
agree.
And that's what I think you have to think about it as. It's like we are pre-programmed in our DNA to not be thinking about, to be worried about the future, to be worried about survival, and you got to figure out a way to get out of that and to get grounded. I think what you just said is huge. I think having some movement, even if it's just walking, I mean, it's amazing how many problems, a 45-minute walk will solve in my life anyway. Just moving and being outside makes a big difference for me.
Yeah. I get my workouts in the morning. I've had this routine now for a couple of years, and it really works for me. I can always control when my day starts, 99% of the time. Can't always control when it ends. Plus, at the end of the day, man, I can tell you this. I'm fairly disciplined. There's no way I'm going to get into the gym nearly as often at the end of the day as opposed to the beginning. And so that was kind of my exercise for the day. But what I've started to try to implement, I read Casey Means' book, Good Energy, I think it's called. And she was talking about how, if you have 10,000 steps, let's just say, and you do all 10,000 in the morning, like, yeah, that's great. But if you spread it out throughout the day, it's better for you. And so that really hit home with me because, like you, I'm sedentary. Right? We're on the phone, we're on Zooms, we're working on whatever it is we're working on our computers. I have a stand-up desk, which is nice, but I'm not out walking and really moving.
No.
And so I started setting timers on my phone to occasionally just go outside, take a little 10-minute walk around the building. I'm able to do it much better now because it's not 110 degrees here. I tried that a couple of times. I came back. I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm like all sweaty and I'm a mess. And so I stopped doing that, but I'm back to it. And it's amazing because I come back to the office and I just have this more clarity, right? Like whatever was stuck in my head, I've kind of thought through. And for me, if I'm on the phone, I'm usually kind of pacing around my office. I just think better on my feet. And getting out there and doing that, even a 10-minute walk really helps me kind of get things flowing and get back into that groove of being able to think. What are you doing throughout the day? Or do you just kind of have one-time exercise?
Actually, no, it's very similar. And because I actually was talking to somebody about this and they're like, because I told them like, look, I'm having trouble. And they're like, by the way, these numbers aren't magical. There's certain kind of protocols you want to hit certain amounts. But I'll tell you what I've noticed is if I don't take affirmative action, it's 3,000, 4,000 steps, on a good day if I'm just going to work and coming home. And that just tells you what the default setting is, which is terrible.
Yeah.
So it's like, doing like little micro things like you're saying is exactly what I'm looking to do is figure out just 10 or 15 minutes where I can do these things. If you're doing it 3 times a day, you're going to get to that number. I mean, it doesn't take as much as you think, but more importantly, man, I get a ton of mental clarity out of that. It helps me get, I think the other aspect of this is perspective and zoom out.
Yes.
Because as lawyers, we are, look, a lot of professions are like this, but we really are just dealing with people's problems all the time. That's, if I have to explain it to somebody, and by the way, the city hall isn't that different. So it's just problems all the time, and they're sticky. They don't get done right away. Some of them have no good solutions. But I think getting some time to just zoom out mentally is really helpful. And that's what I use it for as well. I sleep better when I move. I mean, it's like
100%.
Like it's crazy how much difference it doesn't like, I know you're into marathons and stuff. I'm like super impressed by that. I'd love to.
Well, hang tight. I have yet to run a marathon. Talk about a grind. I'm in week 15 of training for mine. I got 5 more weeks before the Marine Corps marathon. And this has been an absolute beast. Just a beast. The mileage that's piling up at this point in the training program. So no, I'm not a marathoner. I do run, yes, but I will be a marathoner hopefully by the end of October.
Well, you'll have to do a whole podcast just on that because I want to hear how that goes.
All right, we'll do that. So sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that's it. I mean, I think it's that simple. It's just getting some time to zoom out.
Yeah.
My dad passed away this year. It was a long ordeal. He had a lot of health issues. The benefit of it was we got to spend a ton of time with him, and we knew that things, time was probably short, but whenever you lose somebody, it was the first time I had lost a parent. It's just, again, it's like, I mean, it's devastating. But then it also just forces you to really, I think this year more than any other year in my life, I'm just like really got a lot more perspective about these things. And so I think you got to be open to kind of listening to the signs in your own individual life. Everybody's going through different places, right? And if you're always in a rush to get someplace, you're missing. And I'm not even saying this from a spiritual thing, but I'm saying from like a day-to-day, be looking and listening to your body and what's going on around you. Because there's things out there that I think can help you get grounded wherever you are, but you got to be looking for them.
Absolutely.
So for me, that was like a big event that really kind of just put my feet in the ground. I just was like, look, this is not forever, man. You got to enjoy this time with your kids.
It's amazing how quickly the day-to-day problems and the things that have you all twisted up don't matter one bit when, a major sickness or obviously something like your parent passing away. That is a massive perspective changer. And, you can allow yourself to go back to the previous perspective, or you can really latch onto that and say, you know what, this isn't how I want to live my life. I don't want to live my life, sitting here at the dinner table, watching my wife's mouth move while I think about a problem at work. Right. I may have done that once or twice and been called out for it.
that seems specific.
Yes. It may have happened like last week. But yeah, like that's not how I want to live my life. And it's sometimes you just need those hard slaps across the face of, look, man, this is what's really important. So speaking of designing your life and what's really important, you did something pretty cool over the summer. You spent, what was it, like 3 months in South America?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So my wife's family's from a small country in the middle of South America, Paraguay. And not to be confused with Uruguay, which is its neighbor. But Paraguay is landlocked. Uruguay is not. So I always joke, it's like the Kansas of South America. But I've been there before. Our last time we went, my oldest was like a baby. So it had been over 10 years ago, but we'd never gone there for an extended period of time. And so as a child, she went there and she became fluent in Spanish. She was born in the US. Her parents came here. But I think it was life-changing. I mean, it was really interesting. We were there for 3 months. My kids went to school because it's winter down there. It's summer here. So they went to, a school where they were, around people who pretty much were most comfortable speaking Spanish all the time. They played soccer on teams, with people speaking Spanish. That was, that's the only option here. And for me, I took lessons in Spanish. I actually am still working with my tutor who works at the American Embassy in Asuncion. So we're doing virtual Zoom Spanish lessons still. I'd taken Spanish before, but to just be immersed in the culture was a really neat experience. The thing that, you're probably listening to all this, you're like, well, did you work? And the answer is yes.
Yeah, so I think that's the coolest part about it is you designed your life to be able to do this.
I was a little nervous about it. We have a team member who's been a virtual assistant with us for a little over 2 years, and she's in Argentina. And I told her, Clara, I'm thinking about going down there and working. How do you think? Yeah, I'm a little nervous about it. She's like, Kevin, I've been doing that for 2 years. It's no big deal. So I was like, okay, so I guess we can figure this out. So we did. And actually, I met with her in Buenos Aires, and we had lunch, which was really neat. The world's not as big as you think, I guess, is the bottom line. And I think we put up these barriers on, hey, I can't do this or that. But the bottom line is, I think there's a way. You just have to be creative about it. We had to be really creative to figure it out. But it was a neat experience for our kids. And, our firm services about 15 to 20% of our clients are Spanish only. And we've got 4 or 5 team members now that are fluent bilingual. And, for me, I looked at it as also an opportunity for me to strengthen that because, I want to be able to communicate better with those clients. Yeah. And so it's already helped me. I mean, it's crazy. I'm still far from being where I want to be with the language, but it's helped me in terms of communication. So it's been great.
So what were some of the biggest problems that you faced while you were down there trying to work, from that's
a long list, my friend.
All right, give us like a story of something that popped up. You're like,
very different.
Never thought about this.
Yeah. So first thing you got to understand is, like, I think as Americans, we think everybody in South America is the same, right? And it's not. That's wrong. Like, we went to different countries and they were very different from each other. Even the way they speak Spanish is very different. And Paraguay has a lot of challenges. It's very impoverished. It's the second poorest country in South America. Now, we were living an American life that was good, but you're around people who have a lot of challenges. So I think that was really good for us to all to see. And my wife's family is like super involved in some nonprofits down there. So we were able to, my kids were able to really, I think, connect in the country in a unique way through those organizations. But you were asking me, like, what were some challenges? There's a saying I have that at least I came up with it, is like, I sometimes feel like it's just like good enough's good enough down there. It's very different. Like, and by the way, that sounds like an insult, and it's not. It's actually contra to the thing we were talking about earlier, which is Americans' fixation on end results being like achieved and perfection.
Yeah.
kind of that obsessive culture that we have, they're different. Different.
Probably get a lot more done too, right?
They have people are very happy. It's one of the happiest countries, I think, on any index you'll see, even though it has more poverty. People don't work themselves to death. They have families, they have lives, they go out during the week, they're with each other and having fun. And I was telling my wife actually a few weeks ago, I said, I feel more stressed here than I was there. It's just hard to explain why, but I think it's a cultural thing. It's a cultural phenomenon. Like when you go there, you're immersed in that kind of atmosphere. And when you come here, you're kind of getting the opposite. Now there's benefits to both. Like, look, American ingenuity and workaholics, that we've achieved a lot. Like,
right.
It's a great country, great wealth generation, all that. But man, they seem pretty happy down there. I'll just leave it at that. So it challenges you in that way. You can kind of see the other side of things.
And I think that's one of the things that America screws up is we don't travel enough. And when we do travel, we're busy ticking off points. Okay, did you see this? Did you see this? Did you go here? Did you go there? We're not spending any time actually absorbing the culture. And that's one of the things that I really want to do with our kiddos is take them all over the place. And we were blessed enough to be able to go spend 8 days in Italy. Sarah and I were. We didn't take the kids this time, and we met my best friend and his wife over there, and we stayed in a villa. And we got to go to kind of the same coffee shop and pastry shop several times. And we kind of started knowing our way around, and we found some of the places that the locals go to. And same thing. It's just a different pace of life. The people there, at least the ones that we ran into and spoke with, were really happy. They were really happy. And I think it's really telling. Like, okay, well, we're all capable of joy. What are you focusing on to bring that joy? And I think, when you said that they're one of the happiest nations around and also one of the poorest, that should be kind of a light bulb moment, right? And lead to some real self-reflection like what you were talking about earlier. So here's my biggest question is, you said that your kids were in school. It was summertime here. How did you sell that? You just sold your kids on year-round school.
That's hilarious. The 11-year-old caught on to that a lot quicker than the 8-year-old. The 11-year-old was like, what the heck is going on here? But there was some discussions about that.
You bribed him. You had to have bribed him.
There were, I didn't feel that sorry for him. To be honest, what we told him was, look, here's the deal on school. Grades to us don't matter. And when they heard that, they were like, what? And I was like, they don't matter. Like, I want you to go. I want you to make friends. I want you to learn the language. And if you get a D in math, it's okay. We'll figure it out. But he didn't, but the truth is it didn't matter. And they made a ton of friends. And what I saw is that they learned the language quicker on the soccer field than in the classroom. And some of the words he learned, I'm not sure.
Hey, babe, what does this word mean that he's using?
But his accent was like right on point every time. So I never criticize him for that, but when he comes back and plays soccer here in the US, I'm like, be a little careful with that. You don't
yelling at his teammates in Spanish.
Yeah. You may not want to deploy that one on the field.
That's funny. That's hilarious.
But they did great. Kids are, I think they're obviously, they're very good at picking up language quicker than adults, but they're also just so much more flexible in mind. They're just used to new things all the time. We have become, as we get older, so routinized in things and so stuck that I think it was harder for us, than them. They were just like, yeah, this is different, but hey, man, like I'm doing something different every day anyway, right. I'm literally learning something new all the time. And so this isn't that different than my normal life. It's just a different country.
That's huge. All right. So talking about communication, I was at my 8-year-old daughter's softball game last night. And this is her first year of softball. She'd never played before. And we're at, game 5 or so. And so she's still figuring it out. And last night, she has yet to get her first hit. Last night, she is at bat. and the count is, 1 ball, 2 strikes, and another. I'm sorry, two balls, 1 strike, and another strike comes over the plate. All right, so the third base coach looks down at her. He's like, "Hey, Liv, you got to be ready to swing. Got 2 strikes. Got to be ready to swing." And so she's locked in, man. We've been working like daily, working for that first hit, right? So she's locked in. I can see it in her eyes. And there's runners on second and third. So maybe her first hit drives in a runner too, which would be really cool. And so she's there. Counts 2-2. Pitch comes across. It bounces in the dirt before it goes over the plate, and she takes a big old golf swing at it. And I'm like, what was that? And I look over, and the third base coach is tapping himself on the chest. And I'm like, what's this? And I can hear him because we're sitting close enough. He said, "Liv, I wasn't clear enough. You only have to swing if it's a strike." And I was just kind of like, it never occurred to me that he was saying anything other than that. But right. I played baseball for a long time, right? So that's a huge communication issue. He saw it and realized what he had said and how it messed up immediately. But it's funny because when we were doing our quarterly evaluations at the firm yesterday, and then we have some more today, I saw the same thing in me. I will communicate something assuming that they have the background to understand what I want. Yeah. Without making that clear. And that is a big, big problem, I think, with law firm owners, with owners all the way across, managers. And so you have obviously a ton of experience with communication, being in politics. You had to be very careful with what you said. So tell me, as you're going through and you're training a new employee, or as you're going through and you're working through, a communication plan with someone on any kind of a topic here, how do you put that together? Or do you think about where their knowledge is based on where you think it is?
Yeah, no, it's huge. Scaling anything, you need to bring your people to the level, right? To the level that's expected uniformly with the firm. You want to have consistency in service, consistency in messaging. And there's a lot to that. But in terms of like hiring, onboarding, training, actually I'm doing EOS, as I know you are. And I think I picked this up from there, but the language I think of is always be clear to be kind, meaning like, if you're not, people think about like having to tell someone, "Hey, you did a crappy job." Were you clear enough on the beginning of that? Because if you are clear, and it may seem overbearing in a way, but you're actually just trying to be kind to them, to be as clear as possible as to what your expectations are, right? And so I think that's huge. It's a work in progress for me, but that's something I'm thinking about all the time. The other thing is that everybody's in a different place. So it kind of depends on where they are. But I think having a period of shadowing somebody is huge. Like and I still do this even with some of our people who've been with us for a few years, is like, if we're doing a new type of phone call with a client and I want to train them on it, it may seem like double time, but like, we're going to do it together,
Yeah.
Maybe that's not the best scalability thing. We should be creating a process and blah, blah, blah. But I think there's just a certain level of human aptitude that has to come through on the job training,
Right.
Not everything can be written down. And the way we communicate with people is more than just the words, right? Like, so you cannot just, and that is probably something I've really honed, in my prior jobs, is like, it's how you make them feel. It's how you relate to them. It's your intonations. If you're in person, what are you doing, like, with your hands? Where are you sitting? One of the things we're doing right now, Scott, which I know you're probably way ahead of me on, is when we close the case and someone's coming to get their check, this is not a monetary transaction. It is, but that's not what this is about.
It's not the main point of it.
This is cementing the relationship in a way that they feel, so grateful that we helped them, and we feel so grateful that we got to help them, right? And it's a celebration. Like, we're sitting them down. We're asking for honest feedback, criticisms. If there's anything we could have done better, we're soliciting that actively. We're giving them a gift. We're giving them a check, obviously, but we're really, hopefully more than any of that, talking about their life in the past, where they were and where they're going in the future. And we're listening like intently to those answers. So maybe that's like a microcosm on how communications, I think, should go. But I think it's just a lot more than, when was your last appointment?
Yes, very robotic.
By text message, and I know everybody wants to automate everything, but I just philosophically, I just disagree. Like that's not who we're trying to be. We're trying to really hone in on the personal aspect of our client communications.
Yeah. And for us, I feel like we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to automate all of the, one-off tasks to where our team can spend more time with the client. They can spend more time on those higher level tasks. And just to kind of finish up the thought on communication, we spend so much time figuring out how to communicate to juries. Right? I can't tell you how many times I will rewrite a closing outline or an opening or a director cross-examination with exact wording because that's how I want it communicated to a jury. But yet when it comes to communicating with the team or with a client, maybe not nearly as much thought goes into it. So that's just something I was convicted of yesterday during our quarterly meetings. And then it was exemplified during Liv's little softball example last night. All right. We are out of time, my friend. We're out of time. So let me ask you one last question. Give me your 3 top books. It can be business, it can be fiction, nonfiction, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So the book I'm listening on Audible, I think it's called The Comfort Crisis. It's
it's an amazing one.
Have you heard of it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's fascinating. It kind of goes into what we were just talking about Americans being a bunch of pansies. Sorry. But we work in air conditioned offices. We don't get out and move. And mentally we just aren't really adept at dealing with conflict, and we just go to our corners. And so I think it's fascinating. So that's what's on my Audible. In terms of what's on my nightstand, I've been in Tom Petty's biography. I'm a big Tom Petty fan.
Likewise.
And I've been learning. I find interest in biographies, but I'm trying to do non-business stuff to just kind of mix it up.
Yeah.
But so that's the other book I've been reading. I'm sure there's others that I'm always picking up the business stuff. But those are the 2 that come to mind.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you rearranging your schedule to be on with us today. And thank you to everyone for tuning in to this episode of the Driven Crowd podcast. We'll see you next time.